Hey, good evening. Welcome. It is Tuesday, September 14th, 2021, and we're convened as the Provo City School District Board of Education, and we're meeting at 2080 West, 940 North in Provo, Utah, in Boardroom 1. And we will begin with a roll call. I'm Melanie Hall, Board President.
Rebecca Nielsen, Board Vice President. Jennifer Partridge, Board Member.
Gina Hales, Board Member.
McKay Jensen, Board Member.
Terry McCabe, Board Member.
Nate Bryson, Board Member.
Derek Anderson, Business Administrator.
Keith Patel, Superintendent.
All right, and welcome. We're going to begin with the COVID update and turn the time over to Doug Finch, our Assistant Superintendent of Student Services.
All right, nice to be with you. We're going to be fairly brief and try and expedite a report to you. I've got Jason Garrison, who's worked with me on trying to have a plan for a contingency that has been in place since the last legislative session. It's one of the few things that we do know needs to occur such that action would be taken in school, and that is if we reach thresholds of outbreak that we feel like school attendance is a concern, and that would be that when schools that are under 1,500 students reach that threshold of 30 students, that they would need to go into a test to stay, as well as schools that are above 1,500, if they reach the 2% of the students at that school, then they also would need to initiate a test to stay protocol. That's a significant process that we felt like as we studied that, and we just have heard even recently, there's a couple schools recently that have had to institute that, so it's not such a far cry of something that could occur that isn't occurring, that there's at least 1 or 2 locations in the state that are enacting that this week. So we felt like we wanted to have our plan in place. So as part of your board docs, we hopefully uploaded some information for you that takes you through a couple of slides here that Jason will kind of guide us through with me. So if you have questions, if you had an opportunity to review this, you'll see that we just have a timeline as well as a couple of scenarios for our middle schools, which are kind of around 1,000 students, our elementaries, which average closer to 500, and then our comprehensive high schools, which of course are in that threshold of over 1,500, and those will be the scenarios. So Bonnie, if you'll kind of take us to the next slide. Again, this just outlines what I mentioned, is that it is in Senate Bill 107 that this is in place as far as us requiring to do a test to stay. Move to the next slide. So the schedule, as you can see here, once we've identified with the Utah County Health Department that we need to enact a test to stay protocol, we have outlined here that it would take us about 5 days from completion to finality of having that in place. Now, school would stay in session through this whole process. We would just try and follow this timeline. As you can see, some of the major benchmarks we'd have to reach to be prepared to enact that. Of course, involved in that is everything from laying out a schedule, notifying and securing parent approval, to also making sure that we have the staff, the PPE, the tests available, such that we could execute the plan. You can see that day 4 on that slide was when we would actually be trying to do it within a 1-day schedule, and then day 5 would be a makeup possibility for those who are able to attend on that. You can see here, here's the scenario that associates with being able to do this in a middle school, and then the previous slide, I think, was that the scenario 1, that's that elementary school, and then finally scenario 3, high school, elementary, and middle school, of what we'd see as the equipment we have to prepare. You can see we've been detailed maybe more so than you need to know, just knowing that we have something ready to execute in the case of needing to implement this. We benefit a lot because we conducted a ton of testing last year with Test to Play, and we have a lot of staff in-house as well as the expertise to be able to execute this as necessary. The final slide in here, I think, is an idea of how much time would it take. This gives us an idea, just so you can see that we've even allowed for a pacing for us as to how quickly we would have to move through a student body so that we could get everyone done during a 5 or 5.5 hour school day, and be able to capture it in such a way that that it's not too over the top. You can see there's scenarios here of depending on the size of the high school, how much time it would take. Would average with high school kids about a minute per test would be our pacing here. Middle schools 2, and then a little more time per elementary school. But again, in all of our scenarios, we're able to do this and better as far as our practice and working with being able to do student testing. So I'll pause there, and Jason and I can answer any questions that you have related to this plan. Melanie.
In a high school, for example, you would probably be using one of the gyms. Would that displace one of the classes, and where would they go?
There's all kinds of possibilities. We could use an auditorium. We could use a lot of spaces that maybe don't have classes scheduled. A gym could be an option. and particularly depends on what the time of the year is, Melanie, oftentimes those gyms are backup spaces for, say, a PE class that otherwise could be using an outdoor facility. So there's many places that are a possibility as far as being able to stage and move people through. This very much would feel like a picture day, which does take place often in the auditorium, where you can have students come in one side, go to the stage, get their picture taken, and exit out a different door, and you can move everyone through in a pretty efficient manner. Thanks for the question. Rebecca?
So, on that 5-day schedule,
Can
we
you
don't
back up
actually,
Bonnie to that, is that all right?
we don't actually test till day 4, which is still 4 days after we've met that threshold.
Sure.
And we're okay to wait that long? Are there any kind of timelines or anything we have to adhere to?
No, this is the sort of thing that every school who's doing this executes. Well, the minute you reach that threshold, sirens don't go off and doors start closing, you can't get in or out of the building. It's a moment of, frankly, conversation we begin with the county health department. So in concert with them, we identify, even if we've reached the 30 threshold, there's a conversation we've had in the past saying, how many people come off of that 14-day window in the next day or two? And if we can demonstrate that we're going to lose, say, a dozen people who are on the last couple days of their 14 days isolation, there's been times before where they've said, let's just continue to watch and wait before we execute this onerous process. So in other words, there's a window of opportunity to get this accomplished as opposed to drop dead, you need to do it today, tomorrow. The kids can't come to school unless you execute it. So great clarification as far as that flexibility it is for decision making and executing this.
So it says on the first day that the school's going to draft a letter. Is the district going to prepare like a form that then all they have to do is, okay.
Yeah, we
so
already
really
have
they
those.
just have to fill in the dates and the
Right.
location. So
They customize it to their site, to what the execution of the plan is, specific to their needs, their facility, their numbers,
yeah.
and so forth.
So it's possible they might be able to consolidate 0 and 1 could all happen on the same day possibly.
Yeah, and day 0 is day 0 because it's work we've already done. So
Yeah.
so day 1 is actually day 1. Day
Okay.
0 is work that we've already got in our back pocket.
Okay.
Kudos to the American company for having acquired over 20,000 tests, so we're ready.
And we still have a stockpile of nearly 5,000 from last year from when we were doing the tested to plate. And those, so we aren't at a loss of equipment at this stage.
Are those have an expiration date?
They did, but those expiration dates were extended.
And kids that are already in the Red Camp system, will they need to re-register at all, or is it all still there?
Yeah, and built into that is some of the nuts and bolts of do we hand enter those individuals? Do we ask parents to put them in ahead of time? Every effort that the community can help us get them in the Red Cap, it saves us the clerical work on the backside. But we'd handle anyone either direction on that. But if you're in that system, I think you're still in that system. Great questions. You guys know a ton about this.
Have we
Very-
heard
very
anything about,
impressed.
I'm just curious, I know there was elementary up in Davis, but you're going to be required to do tests today. Have we heard anything more about that?
No, we heard that same news along with you, that's what came out of that school district. And I think they were at like 38, 39, so it's again an example of the question saying, once they hit 30,
so anything under, if your school is under 1,000, the number is 30. It's not a percentage, it's just 30.
Right. So that school in Davis reported that they're even at like 38, 39 as of yesterday. So in other words, you can see they're having ongoing conversations about when and how to pull that off with the Davis County Health Department. And so, yeah, we certainly will learn from this. We learned a lot, frankly, in some of this execution of this plan by looking at what schools in the Jordan District, the Canyons District, and the Neville School District who did test to stay last year as part of their management last spring. So we got 4 or 5 different scenarios and have learned from visiting those administrations and those staff on how to make that happen.
This timeline, for all transparency purposes, is more for the secondary, the larger schools, trying to track down and catch kids on odd days, even days, and whatnot. The elementary schools, we can probably cut that down to 2 weeks.
We could perhaps, as far as the parent league notification, we could narrow a day here out of there pretty easily, you see, right? A worst case scenario for us. Thank you. And again, appreciate Jason and his thoughtfulness. The school nurses were heavily involved in this. This has been a team effort since we identified a couple of weeks ago that this was a reality for us to try and come up with something to present to you that shows there's management in place if we have to indeed execute this year at any point. So again, right now our numbers are showing as we review those every Friday. I think we're about at the most 1/3 to 1/2 of our numbers in any one given school is reaching that threshold. So we're not on the doorstep of this, but again, it can change really quickly. I know just one other point I wanted to mention, as of last Friday, and I think the board member had asked, what are some of our positivity rates right now with students? We have about 82 students who we have as confirmed tested positive, and that's again by reporting of the parents who contacted us and let us know. It's 42 in our K through 6 grades and 40 in our 7 through 12 grades that are positive student cases as of the beginning of the school year. So that's about 0.6% of our student population, just so you kind of have an idea of where we stand with positive COVID student cases at this point. Any other question I can ask?
This PowerPoint isn't on board docs. Can it be added?
I believe it was.
I will add it, I'll add it.
Okay,
Okay.
yeah, thank you. Yeah, we thought we'd had this information to you so that you could access it at any time. Thank you. Gina?
A little off the subject, N95 masks for the kids, do we have those out to them yet? My daughter doesn't have one. I'm just wondering, have we started the rollout? Have we not?
Yeah, those I think are available in all of our schools. I attended a school this morning that was dealing with a quarantine situation. A lot of letters went out, and they were talking about students who came to school, and they had about 15-20 boxes of those sitting on the table for the faculty to take back with them for kids to use if they came to school that day. So
if parents want their kids to have it, they need to request it?
I think that they're at the school and available. So in other words, I don't think we're handing it to everybody as like some sort of like a as they walk in the door thing. It's available upon request, but I think that they're also making sure that everyone knows it's available to them.
I was gonna say, could we make sure that that's been communicated from the principals that they are available? Because from the people I've talked to, they don't know that.
Okay, yeah, and I think that Caleb Price could help us with that as far as the communication the whole district-wide, and then we make sure our supervisors know to make that part of principals' communication out regularly, that N95 masks are available for students if the parents need that.
I just want to clarify that I think it's good that they're not just handing them out, because there are very few kids at my girls' elementary school that are using them, and we don't want to give them to kids who won't use them.
Right, exactly.
But I do think there needs to be some kind of clear communication that if you would like one, they are available. I haven't gotten that yet, but I understand this process. So, thank you.
No, thank you. That's a great point. Appreciate that feedback. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Doug. Just as a reminder to the public, if you go to provo.edu, along the top, there's an orange banner that you can click on the updates for all on a daily basis to see what's going on at your school. Next, we're going to be doing student travel requiring board approval, and I'm going to turn the time over to Superintendent Rattel.
Thank you. Let's start off with the two trips that are proposed, Dixon Middle School. I've reviewed all of these in advance. I'm recommending that you approve them. However, I would tell you that with the COVID thing still lingering and could be lingering into the springtime, we probably need to put some type of caveat on this, that any approval is subject to just kind of a renewed confirmation within a couple of weeks of the trip, just to make sure things are safe in that location. With that said, though, Principal John Anderson is here to answer any questions you may have about the two Dixon Middle School trips. These are fairly well established in the culture of Dixon for quite some time now. Any questions for John?
Are you planning on buying refundable plane tickets?
Fortunately, the feds got involved this last time when we did cancel, and all refunds were given to students. There was no money lost. We lost a few single-dollar items for tickets that we purchased from like Ford's Theater. There's a $1 cost for the ticket. Very negligible loss. Sad that we lost that, but very small. Students lost no money when we canceled last time.
Okay, good.
Yeah.
And I guess this would go for Provo High as well, and how are we dealing with students who may not have the funds, like they may not have, their parents may not have the money to send them? How do we make it available for them as well?
Fundraisers are done as a group, and students can do some of their own. We've had some students literally hit up every family member probably in existence they know and completely pay for their trip through a group fundraiser that we've done. Some kids don't take the fundraiser very seriously and are able to still come up with it. We have great stories throughout the years of doing this, the last 10 years, of babysitting and snow shoveling, a variety of student chores that are created for students to work their way through this. Payment plans are worked out for the students to get there. There are a couple of instances where students couldn't come up with the money, and we had a couple of faculty members sponsor kids, once the students had been selected, and we knew that there was a need. The students, by the way, no students are chosen based on their ability to pay.
Okay.
And so we've never had a student who wanted to go, not be able to go through combined efforts on our part with the student. And their
That was
family.
my next question. Excellent. I've looked at the plans and I've talked to you a little bit. They look great.
We have a similar plan in place at Provo High School, where there are 4 different fundraisers already planned for our students.
Okay. So any student that has any issues with paying will be helped?
We will work through that with them,
Okay.
and that will be covered.
Okay. Thank you.
So if no more questions about the Dixon trips, let's move to the Provo High School one. This is a big trip, proposed trip. This is a combined fine arts program trip. Kenny, do you want to introduce any aspect about this?
And I guess just in meeting with the other directors in our department, we all have missed the opportunity to help our students see professional opportunities that exist outside of Utah. And so everybody's really excited to provide an opportunity where we get to go to see professional level shows, have clinics with professionals in our different content areas, and see the world outside of Utah a little bit, because these kids have had a kind of locked down kind of high school experience. We want to try to provide that for them.
Kenny, can you clarify, last year there was no trip. Was there a trip scheduled in spring 20 that had to get canceled?
For choir, yes. For the other programs, I'm not exactly sure. But I would imagine that modern dance did not travel that spring. The drama program typically doesn't travel out of state. So this would be a first time experience for those students at all. Same with the jazz band, that's going to be hoping to travel with us as well. This would be a first for those students as well.
Any questions from the board for either Jared or Kenny? And if I miss any other teachers from Provo High School, my apologies.
No.
Sounds like a great trip. Excited that Broadway is opening today.
I know.
Yeah.
I know. We're super excited. We hope we can do it.
There are, most Broadway venues require vaccinations.
Yep.
Students are aware of that?
So that's part of the proposal here, and when we talk about safety, and so all indoor venues are requiring a vaccine. So in order to go on this trip, that would be a requirement, so that they could participate in all the activities with the group. So we do anticipate that there might be some students who choose to stay home, and that's that choice. It's definitely not required of any student. We just want to provide an opportunity for those that are interested, and those are the rules New York City has. So we just have to follow their rules.
Okay, if no more questions.
Just curiosity, so let's say you're doing some performances, are you guys combining it all, or like dance is doing a performance here and choir's doing one here?
So this is starting, it's a big deal. We've started this December, we're going to be doing our own take on the Nutcracker. And so we're all kind of collaborating and doing some fun things. Instead of the battle between the toy soldiers and the mice, it's going to be Duel of the Fates from Star Wars, and we'll have, it's going to be lots of fun. We've done a lot. We've planned a lot of collaboration for this year, and so we're hoping to have a chance to do some things together, and also have a chance to do some things specific to our area. A little bit of both.
I love that.
Any further questions on this one?
Okay, and finally, Zoe, Tiffany Competition Cheer Squad. It looks like it's right around President's Day weekend in mid-February. And board, you've got that. Any questions for Zoe? Zoe, are you here? Zoe's not here. Is there anyone from Tiffany here? Okay, well, maybe not.
I have questions for no one.
Do you have a question about it?
Yeah, I've actually gone on this trip, but they've really stretched it out. You sent me that thing, and I thought, oh no, because it used to be you'd go, and you'd have the cheer competition, then you'd be at Disneyland when you weren't at the cheer competition. You had a 3-day pass, which is a really long time for cheer and a really long time for competition. Then you'd go home. But now they're doing 3 days at Disneyland on the outside of Disneyland with the competition. Then they're doing the 3 days after just at only Disneyland. That sounds super fun, but
School sanctioned activity was my question.
3-day Disneyland trip without cheer. And I don't want to say anything because my wife is the world's biggest cheer fan in the history of cheer. So,
I
in
would
no
like
way
some
is this a
clarification on that.
criticism of
Right.
cheer. I want the cheer people to know.
So is this one that we need to postpone and get some more clarification on the vote on
We
this
could
one?
do that till November. We do approvals in November. I think the only challenge that might run into is whether there are financial commitments that have to be made right now
They're gonna
pending
need it.
your
Yeah.
decision tonight.
Is there any reason why we can't talk about it at our next
Yeah.
meeting anyway?
Or are we just cool with the 3 and 3, the 6-day Disney?
So maybe the coach needs to be informed she has to be here if she wants it approved.
That is in our policy.
So in our policy, it says somebody has to be here from the school in order to approve it?
Yeah.
I think we need to
Out
stick
of
with our
fairness
policy.
So I think it needs to be added.
Okay.
Out of fairness to the school, the principal contacted me. He didn't believe that any trip was going to be discussed tonight that was out of state. So I think there's just a miscommunication on the school's part. They intended to be here, but then they didn't realize this was on the agenda.
And I don't mean to be the fly in the ointment. I'm just very curious.
I think it's a valid concern, that is a long
And they're missing
trip.
2 days of school for it.
And I think they'd miss 2 days no matter what, because the
Because
cheer
that's when the
competition
competition.
is during those times. It's just, okay, do we do, just, and who knows, maybe 3 days. That sounds super fun. So, I'm for it. Let Tim do cheer, let them all know that I'm for it, and we'll vote for it no matter what.
That's why you brought it up. All emails to Nate Bryson.
Yeah, I was just curious. Curiosity. So.
Okay, so what am I doing with this then? Am I telling them that this conditionally approved, or, I mean,
Well, no
after
one's
We
here.
need to make a
you do the
motion
approval.
anyway.
Yeah.
No one's here though, right?
Right.
Isn't it against our policy to approve it with
Right,
anyone here?
so we can put it on the next business meeting.
Or we give the superintendent a lot of discretion, and we can say, it is conditionally approved. We're instructing our superintendent to ask some further questions. If you find something really egregious, please refer it back to the board.
Okay.
I'm fine with that.
That's
There is
fine.
one thing on here that does concern me that I need to get an answer to, so.
Okay.
I'll follow up, and I'll let you know.
Yep.
So when we approve these, do we have something in there, in the stating of the motion that these are all continuing due to COVID safety at the time?
I think you can add that.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Thank you.
Any other further questions about these travels? Right. Moving on, surplus of Wasatch properties. Keith, do you want to take that one?
Yeah, this is about if the board is interested in working a real estate deal with an outside entity, one of our legal requirements is that we do have to, and it would facilitate the move of a school from a current location that we own to another location. We would have to surplus that property that we own, assuming that we don't have any other plans for it, assuming we were to sell it. So, or arrange a trade or something. So this is just a formality for the board to declare that Wasatch is surplus. It will remain in surplus for 90 days. I'm pretty confident that we'll get probably one interested party. I don't imagine we'll get more than that.
Any other further comments about this?
I told my Wasatch people to watch on YouTube. So to be clear, this does not mean that we are selling the property. This means we are formally investigating. This does not mean that a location for a new Wasatch Elementary has been determined as of yet. It means that we are earnestly engaged in the process that we'd get to this step on moving forward, but that determination has not been made, or that we would actually sell the property has not been determined. It's this that we're really looking into it.
It's just part of the process.
It's an option.
Yes.
And if we decide not to sell the property, we just easily remove it off surplus.
And keep going.
The surplus time period times out, and we do nothing with it.
Any other further comment or discussion about surplus? Just looking off that. Okay, next, Dixon Middle School.
Dixon Middle School. I think you can start this one.
We have the option tonight to discuss about the possible location of, well, not the possible location, where we would like to put the new Dixon Middle School. And I'm gonna start opening this up. If we could maybe do this for 10 to 15 minutes or less, if possible. Or we can always come back to it in the business meeting, but I can start it off with my feelings of where I would like to see. I would prefer to see it at footprinters. I studied this option a lot, and really it comes down for me, what's the best education for the kids, and I feel like the best place is at footprinters in that term. So I'm going to start with that and open it up to any other board members to voice their opinion.
I'll go. I'm trying to figure out how to make this as short as possible. I would like it to stay where it is. There are some interesting things that have been put on the table that I think I'd be willing to take a look at and discuss with my community. However, it's kind of last minute, and anyway, moving another school out of the central area of the city is very damaging to the neighborhoods that are there. And to me, it's an equity issue. We're moving them all from the central. They're all going west, or east gets to keep them where they are, and I understand some of the reasons behind that. But it's an invaluable asset to have in the community. I'm also concerned because busing numbers have been, from the district anyway, in the community meetings that we did in June, have all been, the numbers, busing walking numbers have all been assuming that we are not going to extend the same courtesy and hazard routes going the opposite direction. Now that can be addressed. And all of these arguments are going to be, I mean, and McKay has come up with some good arguments, perhaps, to move it to footprinters. That's all contingent on trust, and I don't think that the board nor the district has very much trust with the community, so we would really have to work on that, and we'd have to really make some pretty strong promises, and so for me it's about, I like having the central location. I also, one of the arguments to move it is that we can expand population. I don't want more than 1,200 kids in the middle school. That's too much. The research repeatedly shows that smaller schools, particularly middle schools, lead to better outcomes. There's no question in that. So I don't think expansion should even be on the table. I'd like to keep the schools smaller. Also, fiscal responsibility. Anything that we move, I mean, if we move the school, anything that goes in there, it's going to take money to rehab the building. We've talked a little bit about that as well, but it's just there's just for me there's a lot of hidden costs. So those are my
Ned? Nate?
Okay, everyone knows I was a fan of the footprinter site, but I'm really nervous about a campaign where they only need 4,000 signatures. They've proven themselves to be very good at getting signatures, and they're very organized, so if they weren't going to get signatures, I would be fine with footprinters. But let me give kind of the counter argument on why we keep it there, and it all has to do with it all ties back to signatures. First, and I texted this to a couple people, but I want to use good English in this, and I feel like we're making the kids in our district eat turd sandwich. You know, I wanted to use alliteration, but we'll just say by making them go to that school, we're making them eat a turd sandwich every day, and we have the option to do pizza or hamburgers, and I am a diehard pizza guy. You know, I ate it every day, Terry, at the BYU eatery. I ate it there every day. I love pizza, and I'll die. But you know what? Either of those is way better than a turd sandwich. And so I don't want us to have there be a signature thing, push it back to next November, because the signature thing is going to be easy for them to win. They'll just say it's going to raise taxes, because guess what it is. And so as long as there's someone willing to go out and get signatures, they'll be able to get it. And so it'll push it out until next November. We'll have an election. Who knows if we win or lose, and that could push it out again. And it's just a problem. So that's my first argument. I just want it to be done, and it seems like an easy way to build it where it is. The second kind of goes back to my youth. I read this book. I even brought it, but I won't show it to you. It's called The Secrets of the Temple, and it's not Exmos didn't write it. It was about the financial reserve and the Volcker, when Volcker was over the Fed. And it talked about when there's a lot of inflation after Carter, and he went in and he raised interest rates up to 20%, destroyed the economy, they had the Volcker recession. Probably Keith remembers it.
I do.
I remember that time.
I was younger than you think.
Yeah. And, you know, I read that book when I was a kid. My dad did reading for dollars. I was probably in high school. I decided to do economics. I went to BYU. I've always been scared of inflation ever since. And a Fed chairman described his job as he needs to remove the punch bowl as soon as the party gets started. And what that means is when, you know, the economy's going good, things are going great, he needs to make things tough on people. And right now we have Fed funds rate, which is what kind of people base interest rates on, of like pretty much zero. It's 0.25. And our inflation rate is 5.4%. So, and anyone who's shopped knows it might even be higher than that. So inflation's like a real thing. And I went back, I looked, you know, for muni bonds right now, it's like 1.6 for 20 years, which is just like, it's free money. So we need to use that money because it's like free money if we don't take advantage of it right now. And I looked, and in the last 50 years, since modern, you know, modern financial history, the Fed has raised the rate at least 1% in a year 13 times. They've raised it 2% at least 10 times, and they've raised it 2% or more at least 7%. And so if we push things off, we're at risk of a really expensive reckoning. A 1% increase would raise the cost of Dixon $8.3 million to taxpayers. A 2% increase would raise it $17 million. And if we had a 3.4% increase, and this is in the bond statement, we said 5% was what we could go up to. So it's something that's not out of the realm of possibility. That would give us an extra cost of $28 million on this thing. And if you just say a 2% raise plus the inflation over a year, that's $24 million extra we would spend on Dixon. And so for me, I look at this, and if it's a sure thing, and all the Save Dixon people say, hey, I'm not going to campaign, then I'm like, okay, I'm fine with that. But the Fed has said that they're not going to raise interest rates through 22. But I don't really trust the Fed because, you know, they don't get anything by saying, well, we're probably going to raise it in a year. And so I'm really nervous because that is a lot of money. And once the party ends, it really sucks to be holding the bag. So those are my hesitations. That's kind of why I'm not on the side. I'm just stabbing all my partners in the back and being best friends with Save Dixon. So that's my thinking on it. So sorry, it's a long time.
All right, do you expect me to talk now?
No. Well, you're
only because I want to talk about the financial thing, because two things came. So in the business meeting, I would like a little bit to say about how we should absolutely be committed to that neighborhood. I have appreciated actually all the engagement, and they've won me over. I'm reading their books. I'm reading Chuck Marone. I'm looking at all those things. And I'll want to talk about that at the business meeting. But it comes to that financial piece, that $15 million. We have new experience that everything we have tried to squeeze in to a small site has gone over budget. Every single one, by a lot. Not just a little, by a lot. From Provost Elementary, we had one project that was on time and on budget. It had a clean site. Provo High, the most expensive. Thank heavens we did that. Everything else, I understand that I really want to be on Team Nate. I might have been halfway on Team Nate last night, And I know that this is a $15 million decision. It's a $15 million decision either way, because putting it on the site, Mark is really good, but we always find something. And this always changes, and management over a 3-year construction, wherever we go, I have no faith that the only way is if we can get, is a risk, because if I go one way or the other, yep, I'm risking that $15 million. If I go that way, I'm risking that $15 million. At least maybe I can talk to this, I can work with this community if I really value that community. I have to really value that neighborhood and community and talk about that and really get their buy-in. And that's a big ask, and there's no reason to think that is going to work, except for I've had a hopeful afternoon.
Rebecca?
I want to first acknowledge both sides of the argument on this, and that there's validity on both sides. And I have been, you guys know I have been torn on this, and I have flopped back and forth on where I'm going to end up many times. And the one thing I can't argue myself out of is that moving the school will affect the neighborhood, and I agree with that. I agree that moving the school will absolutely affect the Dixon neighborhood. But when it comes down to it, what I truly believe is that we can do better for that neighborhood in other ways than by having a middle school there. I don't believe in my heart of hearts that middle schools save or secure or are the make or break of a neighborhood. I can't agree with that. I don't want to harm the neighborhood, but I feel like we can do better for it in the long run, in other ways. And I was on Team Nate a few weeks ago, but in my heart of hearts, the one reason I was on Team Nate is because I just don't want to fight, because I'm giving in, and I'm going against what I truly believe is the right option. And if I really want to do what I feel is right, and if I feel like the way we can truly help the neighborhood is by moving the middle school out and doing something better for it. And so I am gonna go with moving.
I'll go next. There's about to be 4,000 new homes built in my area alone. That's 10,000 new students. Where's the third middle school going to be built? We're going to need 3 middle schools. Where are we going to put 3 middle schools in this town if we don't have space at Centennial, Dixon, and Footprinters? We need 3 middle schools. So if we do abandon Dixon and build Footprinters, where's the third middle school going to be? Because my area is not the only one that's about to have houses that have children. Jennifer's area has a whole bunch of housing being built downtown, but they're not going to have kids. We need 3 middle schools. Where is it going to be built?
Go ahead, Jennifer.
So I have a lot of thoughts, and I think I'll save most of them for the other meeting. But I'll respond directly to Terry's. I don't know that I agree that we're going to need 3 middle schools. Often projections have come out wrong, and I think a lot of the new, at least in my area, the new build is going to attract either families without children or young children mostly. But if we do need 3 middle schools, I mean, I don't think any of us would want to, if we move to Footprinters, I don't think any of us want to give up the Dixon property. And so it makes more sense to me, let's build on a fresh site now. The Timpview, we are doing our very best there, but just the first time I walked up there and went, these are what our kids are going to have to live with for the next 2 years. It's hard. And to rebuild on an even smaller site, I mean, it can be done, but if we can build on a fresh site, I think that's so much better, and then we could always build the third middle school back on that Dixon property where it's again a fresh site without children there. So I think there are a lot of other reasons to move it as well. But I agree with Rebecca that I think I care about the community, I care about the students who live in the entire boundary, including the ones who live close to it right now, and I think they all deserve the best school possible for their education, and I think that can happen better on a larger property where we can keep them safer with our parking and drop-offs and the amenities we can provide for them. Will give them all the best education possible.
And now we have to build permanent portables for Sunset View. Because if there's not enough space at Footprinters for a middle school and an elementary school because of those 10,000 new students, there's permanent portables at Sunset View. You guys didn't want permanent portables at Tinview, so why should we put them at Sunset View?
Is that on the table? Is that something we're discussing?
There's 10,000 new students about to show up in my area alone. There's going to be a need for a 14th elementary school and a 3rd middle school.
Can everyone keep in mind the explosive growth that we hear about? Explosive growth. Alpine, 1.5%. Do we have explosive growth? Do we have 1.5? And even if we had 1.5, what is that number? That's not 10,000 students.
No. 10,000 students is doubling, almost doubling what we have in our district.
Explosive growth.
4,000 houses.
That's right. Houses are different, but explosive growth is still one in Alpine. That's 1,000 students a year. That's a whole school a year. That's big trouble. But we're not 90,000 students to begin with, and we have that weird dip in middle schools. Every number we've ever projected has been wrong. No matter how much we've paid for a number for a projection, it has always been wrong on the middle school part. And if we've got to pay attention on the right thing, and if we're going to be concerned about growth, people who buy growth have elementary students. You got to be worried about elementary capacity, and what that managing that capacity will do and do to a neighborhood. Obviously, you know, I'll have a lot to say. We will have growth. What kind of growth? Where would that growth have? We've had growth at around Provo Peaks because it's an elementary school. We have great walkable neighborhood because it's an elementary school. If we, yeah, absolutely, if we build on site, we're probably going to put an elementary school at Footprinters. That's going to have effect on downtown. Where do people decide to buy a house? Where their middle school is or where their elementary school is? You're going to buy a house 2 years for your students or 7 years for your students. We've got to think about this all together on how this will affect the neighborhood and what that growth is. And I told you, I've been listening to all the Save Dixon people. Chuck Marone, principle number 5. Stop stressing about growth. Deal with what's in front of you. That's principle number 5, Chuck Marone. For those online, really, I've been reading the book. You've sold me. I believe you.
Any further discussion about Dixon? We will be coming back to this at the business meeting. So, all right, now we're going to move on. ESSER ARP, Derek Anderson.
Can we move to J first and then come back to the ESSER ARP, just because we've got people willing to leave?
Absolutely. So when are we going down to?
It'll be J.
Okay, we're on J. We'll come back to G in a minute. Adoption of resolutions to issue lease revenue bonds. And we'll turn it over to you, Derek.
So what you got before you is the resolutions the board would need to adopt as both the board and the municipal building authority. So it's kind of wonky. You'll have to do two separate approvals for as the Provo School District Board, and then later we'll convene as the municipal building authority, and then approve municipal building authority and then close back out of there. What you've got right there is the bond schedules that Designs has prepared. It does not mean that that is what the interest rates will be or that what the bond amounts will be. It's more of what the board is authorizing to go up to. In there's an 8% escalation cost over the current estimates, along with $3 million of FF&E potential costs also. And so as the time comes to where we have more accurate bids on what the construction is going to be, when we actually issue the bonds, it would be whatever that number is closer to being.
What did you say?
So FF&E is furniture, fixtures, and equipment. So it'd be like the desks, TVs, computers, all the stuff that's chairs, lunchroom stuff, all the things that you'd be putting in all the classrooms and things like that.
What did you say the percent escalation was on?
8%.
For both?
Yes.
Okay.
Sorry, and we are including the FF.
Correct. So I've added an extra $3 million on one and $4 million for the middle school for that.
Are you sure 8% is enough? Should we go higher?
It's a good question. That was kind of based on the last conversation that occurred with Mark and our construction team. I had him go back and say, can you give me updated numbers? Because what other escalations are we going to see? And he said, Mike, and so we went back and they looked and they said, we're going to estimate an 8%. And so that was kind of between what the original estimate cost was. And then when I went back a couple weeks ago and said, can you give me a better estimate based off of what potential estimates are, based off of the temp US escalation that we saw.
Do we, I just want to make sure, do we have in here how much this is going to cost taxpayers?
That is not in here. So it depends on that, and that will also depend on what we do with our tax rates. So if we adjust our tax rates to do some things, that can mitigate about $4 million. This annual payment, these two projects right now are about $6 million between the two of payments, and so it would potentially mitigate a large chunk of what would be increasing the taxpayers. I've got a spreadsheet I can pull up and get that if there's any other questions that people have.
Any other questions about these?
At what point we go forward with this, can we then determine to the public what the impact is going to be for them?
Yep. So we can when we issue the bonds, we can make that we can make it known then, or as the next year in the future. We could also indicate what as we like the next year's treatment taxation occurs, when that would be also. So right now, for $2.5 million, it would be on an average home value $84. If it was the full $6 million, and that's $84 a year. If we did the full $6 million, it would be about $218.
All right. So tonight we would approve this, but then we don't issue the bonds till we're ready to begin the project.
Correct. So this is just giving the district and the board saying we authorize the district to issue these bonds, and so then what will happen is all the legal steps will need to take place, clearing the 30-day issue, getting bond ratings in place, getting construction estimates and all those kinds of things before we actually then issue the bonds. And the issuance would probably happen around next springtime.
Any other further questions about this?
Am I letting you guys?
Do you have anything that you would add to what he's told us?
No, I mean, he said that, the key thing, I guess, is with the approval of these resolutions, one doesn't force the district or the building authority to move forward, so if, you know, there's any kind of change and you decide not to, you don't have to. It gives the board and the authority the authority or the permission to move forward with the bonds. But it doesn't set in motion something that can't be stopped at any point.
That's helpful.
I'd echo just from the financial side that rates persist in being incredibly low. We still hear a lot of stuff. We're talking about 8% inflation. You know, all the news is about inflation. Oh my goodness! And normally that moves in lockstep with interest rates going higher. And thus far this cycle, we have not seen that. So we're hearing inflationary pressures, but we're not seeing interest rates go higher. And so that makes for a good environment for borrowing for the time being.
Pass the punch.
You gotta drink it.
Okay. All right, well, thank you. We appreciate you being here. So, I guess we'll go back to G then, is that okay?
Yep. Thank you, Brandon.
All right, back to ESSER and ARP, and if you want to explain what ESSER and ARP are for our viewers or listeners.
So, right before the board is the ESSER/ARP application. So ESSER is I remember the ARP. ARP is the American Recovery Plan, or the ESSER 3. It's ESSER 3.
Elementary and secondary school emergency relief fund.
And so this is what the latest round of the federal government stimulus package is what we will be getting to our district. Part of those that requirement or that requires us to put the plan out to the public for input, which we did. It's been out for about 2 weeks now. I've not received any input on it. And they also have the board approved plan. So this is what you got before you is the tentative plan of what we would be using the funds for. And then if we deviate or any adjustments need to happen, we bring that back before the board to say, hey, look, we want to adjust the plan to do these other things and not this.
Can you explain the last one? Says indirect costs is required by state and federal guidelines.
Yep. So on every grant, well, not every grant. There's some of them, but a lot of federal and state grants, there is what is called indirect costs. Indirect costs are the stuff that happens on the back end, payroll, accounting, HR, to run programs. That amount that we charge is set by the federal government or the state. We cannot legally waive it or change the amount because we would be breaching all of the other rates across all the other grants that are out there. And so we have to charge the full amount or none of it across the board. And so that's kind of what that is. It's a rate that the federal government says, okay, based off of what the district has spent on their back end operations, here's the percent that we will allow you to charge to this grant.
Any other further questions about how we've broken this down and how we're planning on spending it? Okay. If not, we're going to move on to our large purchase request. And Derek?
All right, so we got 2 large purchase requests. One of them is going to be for the Chromebook adapters as part of the ESSER plan. We want to have Chromebook adapters to allow for students to be able to take them home in the event that there's, they need to shut a school down or things like that. And so what we're trying to do is beef up our Chromebook adapters to be able to allow kids to take those Chromebooks home in the event that it's needed.
You mean they already take the adapter home with them, they want stuff at school?
Sorry, Chad.
In the elementary schools, we wire the cards with those charging cords. We don't want the labor to pull those cords out and have to rewire the cards. It takes about 2 hours a card to rewire it.
So this will eliminate a lot of that work too, and it's only in elementary schools where we're done. Secondary schools, they all have a charger that they take home, so this is just for elementary.
Would any of these chargers be at school, so in case the kids forgot to
Yes, I
charge
mean,
there?
they're kept at the school. I mean, it's for possible things like COVID, or if we ever, move towards possibly not doing a snow day, doing an online day, we'd have adapters available for the kids to use and take home and keep them charged long term that way.
Jennifer?
Okay, I don't normally go shopping for adapters, but it seems like $30 per adapter seems really steep. Is there any way we can negotiate a better price than that?
It's about that. I think we negotiated down to 27 apiece.
Okay.
Is what we got it down to. But they're spending, especially now with anything tech, with the lead times and even getting the equipment.
So the supply chain
Yeah,
part
supply and
right now.
demand is causing us big issues.
We did receive 3 bids. This one was substantially lower than the other ones. One was 440,000. The other one was like 300 and some thousand. And so, yeah, I was shocked.
And the 8,600 is to cover all the elementary schools, and then there's a buffer for extras.
Yeah, so we're actually putting extras in the cards because there's a lot of fluctuation in classrooms, but, class loads. So we'll have enough, to cover some of that, putting some extras in the elementary cards as well.
Are there any going to secondary in case of lost ones, or to
Yeah,
have extras?
We have some for that.
Okay.
The nice thing about these chargers too, the USB-C, which is the plan for foreseeable future, that's what all the manufacturers are using now. So they won't go to waste, let's just put it that way. They will get used
Okay.
either way.
So they're universal. Okay. Any further questions about that particular purchase?
Okay, so the other request is, it's a software called Elevation. It is for our English learners, and we actually will be receiving state funds to cover this. That is part of the grant program, and so this is the program that was decided on. I think they went out to bid for this, and that was the one that they selected.
Great. Any other questions about this particular program?
So you're saying the grant's going to pay for everything?
Yeah, so this one is separate. This one's not ESSER or ARP. This would be a specific grant for this.
But we're approving the purchase, but then the grant will then cover it,
Yep.
so really we're not purchasing it. Okay.
Well, they'll get the grant money, we're just telling them they can use it for that.
Yeah, okay, got it.
Any other questions? All right, moving on.
All right, this is the PTIF authorized individuals. With the change of business administrator, we'll need to update with that who is allowed to make changes or adjust things with the PTIF. And so this is just the board reauthorizing who is allowed to be on the PTIF.
Can you just explain what PTIF
is?
Sounds like TGIF,
The
but I'm sure
public,
it's something.
PTIF, let's see here, Public Treasurer's Investment Fund is what the PTIF stands for. It is where we house the bulk of our funds. So when we do have accounts like with Zions, where it's depository, but a lot of our money that we get goes directly to the PTIF, or when we get like our property taxes, it'll go into the Zions, and then it'll sweep into we'll sweep into the PTIF, because the PTIF often gives a better interest rate than, say, Zions Bank, unless you're willing to put it into more investment type accounts. And so it's been authorized and assured, and so that's kind of where a lot of public entities house their funds, because they do get a better interest rate, but you're not being risky in putting it into liquid investments.
Okay. Can you say PTIF one more time? What is it?
Public Treasurer's Investment Fund.
Thank you.
Any further questions about that? Moving on to K. Doug Finch policy review.
This one's really quick. This is a policy you reviewed and approved actually in the spring. We've been working on visitor management for some time in student services under our safety and security initiatives. We received some feedback from some of you that felt like the language in there wasn't representative of us being very welcoming. I mean, it was very much we want to keep our schools safe, and there we wanted to make sure we included language, so we rewrote that, and I think you've got that access there where we show you the strikeouts and the inclusion of language that says we understand that parents and guardians, ones that are approved to come and contribute to what's going on in the schools, are welcome to be there. What we're concerned about are the unauthorized individuals who might come and disrupt or cause safety and security concerns, and therefore the Board of Education wants to create policies and procedures that support that. So it's a revision of that language based on your feedback. So we hope that it's up to come more the muster of the tone we want to set, that's welcoming, kind, and inviting in our schools, and is just an updated edition of what we have.
I love it.
Yeah,
I love
it's
it. We welcome and encourage people to visit our property.
Thank you. I've got a great department who knows how to respond to that feedback. Thanks so much.
Any other further questions about this policy? We'll be approving that tonight. So, thank you, Doug, and your team. Todd McKee is going to explain the bell schedule change at Timpview High School.
Yes, good evening. We've shared with you a request this evening that we've received from Timpview High School, and we're seeking your feedback in terms of the direction that the school goes. So the school fully realized that with the construction this fall of the school that they're going to have a lot of challenges, particularly in terms of students accessing the building, being forced to come through the west entrance, recognizing that many of the halls have been changed, and in fact they're quite narrow at this point. Nevertheless, the school at the beginning of the year felt like let's try to manage these changes through a lot of human resources. They went out and hired extra trackers. They've employed all their staff to help get kids to class on time. Nevertheless, they have found through the first 3.5 weeks of school that the challenges are pretty daunting. Timpview's passing time is actually shorter than Provo High School's passing time right now. It's 5 minutes. Provo High has a 7-minute passing time. Kids trying to make it through the maze up there have had a hard time getting there. They've also found that with the bus and transportation, again with the halls and everything else, many students on any given day are being left behind because buses are just needing to leave to get out in front of the traffic to make their routes. So they have sent to us a request. They've proposed one of 2 schedules for us to take a look at. The first schedule that we shared with you is on the right. What it simply tried to do, in both cases, I want to stress that in both cases they have tried to preserve the 86-minute instructional time in each class. So you see that in both. They're not going to take minutes away from instruction. But what they've tried to do is manipulate the other times. So in the first proposal on the left, you'll note that they've reduced the day by, I believe, 7 or 8 minutes, I think it is. And then they've taken time away from lunch. This has allowed them, though, to only address the bus issue at the end of the day because their passing times remain 5 minutes. They also don't touch, and I think Board President Hall noted this at the beginning, that second period, that second class of the day is actually about 8 minutes longer, and that's to facilitate announcements. So in that first schedule, they maintain the announcements, they shrink the lunch period, and then they shorten the day, and they're trying to address the busing issue. The second proposal on the right comes at it and tries to address both the passing time and the bus issue at the end of the day. And so what you see is that they've reduced the day by 10 minutes. They've lengthened the passing time by 2 minutes to 7. What they've done here, though, to accomplish this is rather than shorten the lunch period, they're maintaining the same lunch period, but they've taken away that announcement period during the second class period time. Our recommendation is that they go with that second proposal for a couple of reasons. One, it addresses both concerns, both the passing time and the end of the day issue with transportation, and then also it maintains the lunch period. What they didn't take into account is we are somewhat bound to provide staff a 30-minute duty-free lunch. And in that first proposal, we're unable to do that. The second proposal, they are able to do that. Questions, feedback from the board?
I assume it still fits within the 990-hour requirement?
They exceed, they're over 1,000 hours at the end of the year, so they meet the 990 state requirement. And it's actually minimal loss from where they're at currently. Again, they maintain 86 minutes in every class period.
Go ahead to McKay and then I'll ask.
Is there any preference anywhere in the system? Here are two. Is there a preference among faculty or a preference among the
You know, from the
principal?
administration, you know, I think the second was that their preference. You know, I encourage them to always come forward with multiple options so we can take a look at that. Obviously, the second one addresses both concerns, whereas the first one only addresses one.
So how's the current schedule? Is it closer to what this first proposal is?
It's much closer to the first. Again, the dismissal time's 2:15 instead of 2:07 or 2:08. What they've done is they have the 5-minute passing time and a 30-minute lunch. So the current schedule is much closer to that first proposal.
If I understand, if I'm doing the math right, the two proposals, it's only a 2-minute difference on the lunches anyway. So between first and second. But, I mean, do they need that announcement time? Because they're ending at 2:05 on the second option and 2:07 on the first option. I mean, they could add 2 or 3 minutes to that time period and do some announcements, right?
They could. The experience of being in a high school, teachers, once they know what their bail schedule is, you know, they're very committed, and they get very protective of shortchanging students in second period simply because of announcements compared to students in third, fourth, or fifth.
Well, that's what I'm saying.
So
if you said they took that out for...
They could, but they would take away instructional time. It's the easy response. Yes, they could build that back in, but it would take away minutes from other classes.
But I'm saying instead of ending at 2:05, we go back to ending at 2:07 or 2:08 and put those couple minutes into the third or fourth period so they can still do announcements and be effective for 3 minutes.
I see what you're saying, yeah. They could do that.
Yeah.
They could do that.
So what do you want us to do? To approve both of them?
This is really about feedback and questions from you.
Yeah, because I don't think we're voting on this.
This isn't a voting item.
And then to clarify, the length of the class period has not changed from what they're doing today?
Correct.
Okay.
So then the one that makes the most sense is the second schedule because it addresses both.
Correct.
With Jennifer's additions.
Whatever works for the
I could give them that feedback
Yeah,
that
I mean,
we're willing to take a look at a different ending time if they want to build back the announcement period.
How does Provo High do announcements right now with their 7-minute time?
I believe they still build it in, and their instructional time may be a little different, but I'd have to go back and look at their bell schedule. I haven't looked at it.
Any other comments, concerns?
I've been over there during announcement time, during period.
Yeah.
Is it effective? Does anybody know? I mean, is it like my high school where that was the time to like throw spit wads and not pay attention? Are they effective? Is it worth it? I don't know. I didn't grow up in a school district.
I think it's the best answer to that is it's about communication in general. The more forms of communication, the more effective you'll be.
Yeah.
And so, in addition to announcements, having posted it, information, emails, Instagram, all that. And so, you know, if this was to go away, they would still have many other venues to use to get information out to the student body. But again, the more that you have, the more effective you are.
Okay. Now, is this something that we're just going to hold on to during construction and then go back to normal after the construction's done?
Certainly.
Okay. All right.
Anything else? Thank you.
That's the reason we're not voting on it.
Okay. All right, consent calendar and review. Reviewing questions. Any concerns or questions about the consent calendar that we were given?
I do.
All right, Terry.
Derek, on the financial report on page 15, so now that the temporary parking lot is not going to be built, what are these funds going to be paid for?
Yep, so those funds, that the budget increase that's in there is still sitting there. We've been told, or they've been told not to move forward with it. And so what happens is if we've increased the budget so far, it's in hold. There's no plan. We're not planning on spending the money. If at some point in time there's discussion in the future about addressing and possibly building it, then it's already in there. Otherwise, at that point in time, if it's done and over with, then at that point we can remove that from the budget.
Okay. And then on page 14,
is it on the executive summary or the disbursement?
executive summary. Yeah. On the far right, it says project status. And most of them say not started, but I know the new kindergarten playground and the gym floor at Franklin are completed. So what else is on this list that is completed and what's in progress?
That's a good question. A lot of this is going to probably come back to timing of when we've been billed for something. I can go back to the individuals that prepared this and have a conversation, but as you can see where it says the actual on those, I'll say 0. That means we haven't spent anything yet, and so we just haven't been billed for it, and that's why you're seeing it say not started.
Mark, go ahead, Mark.
Terry, I typically update those as well for Joe in the business department, and then it gets to Derek, and so I need to go through there and update those as well, especially with some of the recent completed ones.
So is there a schedule of when all the playgrounds need to be replaced? Or the masonry sealants that's on there, or the carpeting and flooring do you have a schedule, a list? And do the principals know where they are on this list?
In some cases, yes. In some cases, no, speaking to the principals. There is a schedule. We go out a 10-year plan, where we go school by school and we project. We think about this capital year, we'll need to do this or this or this. And so we try to follow that as best we can. And then other things, sometimes they come up, and we just take care of it immediately as best we can.
So who has this list, and where is it, and how can people look at it?
So Mark has the list. One of the discussions that Mark and I have had recently is we're looking at revamping our facilities committee that handles the internal projects, and that would involve myself, Mark, possibly Todd. But we're still in the discussion of how we're going to form it and who's going to be on it. But then that would go through that whole schedule, and part of that it would be communication of who's getting what projects done that year, the timeline of things. The board would be aware of what those are. So we're looking at revamping this.
Okay, good. And how do the teachers get to have input in like playgrounds and stuff? Because I asked the kindergarten teachers to give input on the kindergarten playground, and it sounds like they were ignored, and I don't like that. They are the ones who know those kids, so they know what is best for their kids.
So typically, I'll communicate to principals or an admin team, and I make the assumption that they're communicating with their faculty, and then that input's coming back through the admin team back to me. And we usually do that. We usually ask for those requests every November, and then we present the finalized list to the board sometime in February each year.
Yeah, I was disappointed that wood chips were put down at the kindergarten playground instead of something more durable and indestructible. Because those kids love that new playground. They're beating it up already. Okay. On the disbursement summary on page 2, I just wanted to say thanks for putting an explanation in those. That makes it easier. And then Doug, on the homeschool report, how do these numbers compare to non-COVID years?
We have looked recently and not seen a significant difference. There's a slight difference, but not as much as we maybe had thought that this would be very different. At least our initial numbers are that there isn't. We could follow up with you if you want to come by the office and we can look at those reports together.
Okay. That's all my questions.
Okay. Any other further questions about the consent calendar? All right, seeing none, we are talk about upcoming things. We have USDA Fall Regional Meeting coming up on Thursday, September 30th. That will be here at the PDC. Kay, will you be leading that?
Yes. I'll be going to Moab the next day.
All right. I'm assuming dinner. I'm guessing that one again.
Yep, that's always provided. So.
Okay. Anything we need to do for that one?
We'll be going over our legislative priorities. If you wanted to consider, so one of the working groups that I'm involved in at the Capitol is House Bill 428. That was the bill where the Speaker of the House and the Senate President could take over a school district if they didn't like some of the things you did, or they thought you were harming students. If you have input on how you can demonstrate your professionalism, or how you can say that we're actually not like a charter system, or how we might address it, because they want to be the super school board in a way, and they keep talking about, oh well, it's these emergency situations. Some school districts didn't do what we wanted, so we want something with teeth. But they'll get language that could be curriculum, that could be lots of things, that could be where you put a school, that could be lots. It could be just lots of things that we could lose control of. One of the things that I'm encouraging all the other school boards is, if there's a year to complete your MBA, this is the year to do that, because I'm using that. So the USBA Power Up, you go to USBA and log in and do that, because I'm using that to say our boards have training, our boards have statutory training, our boards know what they're doing. They are in fact not volunteers, they are elected officials who know what they're doing. That's becoming a really important point for us to prove. So if you could help me with that effort, that would be
What
great.
if we have a master's not in business though?
They don't go through education. They go, have you been trained in community engagement? And there's a
I
section.
found that those Power Up things have been really useful, actually.
Yeah.
It's not hard.
It's not hard, and it's actually, I find it very useful.
And it's something I'm encouraging all board members throughout the state, because
When do we need to complete that by?
December 1st.
And for the public, MBA means Master Boards Award.
Yeah.
You're not,
So-
not the
It's not a business.
I'm trying. That's a good catch. I'm trying to actually rebrand that to Master Board Certification, because I hate that. So, yeah. So.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, well, we'll look forward to that evening with you.
Yeah.
We have our board retreat coming up on Friday, October 21st, also known as a really long board meeting.
October 1st.
Yeah, October 1st, Friday, October 1st. Then we are also, this year, I'm excited about this, we're going to be having a meeting with our local legislators. And have we heard, Ani, how many responded that they're coming?
All but one.
That's great. Wonderful.
When is that?
Tuesday, October 5th at 4 p.m. Okay. All right, and then probably in here. Okay. So that'll be a great time to meet with them. We have fall graduation coming up. Do we need a speaker for that? You're speaking? Perfect. Thank you, Rebecca.
Don't thank me yet. You might not like my speech, we'll see.
And then we'll have our next study session and business meeting coming up on Tuesday, October 12th at 5 p.m. So, any other questions about the upcoming calendar? No? Okay. If not, is there a motion to adjourn our study session, and we will begin our business meeting at 7?
So moved.
Okay. We'll be back in at 7. Did we make it?
Yeah.
Right on time.